Today I'm going to teach you guys the steps to building your very own fiberglass boat. Building a fiberglass boat wasn't nearly as hard as I thought it was going to be. And since this one didn't end up being very large in size, it ended up being an awesome Halloween costume. And it had even a super sweet candy hole that I could use to collect the candy when I was trick-or-treating. The first step I had was to get lots of big foam from Home Depot and cut it down to size and glue it together. I took a planer and planed the sides down for this little bit of extra, and then I had to build a hot wire foam cutter to cut the foam. I glued two pieces of wood down and screwed them in place, and then I grabbed a section of music wire, stringed it across, and then added some regular wires to allow the current to go through. Later on, I ended up adding a spring onto the music wire, which I suggest you do because the music wire actually will stretch once it starts to heat up, and you want to keep that string nice and tight. So here I am testing it out with a little bit of electricity, and wouldn't you know it, about 2 amps of current and 10 volts, and I had a nice hot wire bow. And it sounded like a pretty guitar also. So here I am cutting away at the foam. Basically, I tried to cut away as much as I could using the hot wire cutter because the rest would have to be sanded away, which would end up taking a lot more time. So here I am cutting away the corners, getting a general shape for the bottom. There I was just replacing the spring on that hot wire bow. Again, wish I had it on there right away at the beginning. And then after that, I busted out the sander and had to start sanding. Now, one thing to note is that this was actually really bad for my sander, and it gunked and clogged it up immensely. The foam has a tendency to actually melt inside the sander while it's trying to exhaust it into the vacuum. And so I ended up spending a lot of time actually picking out all of that plastic inside of the sander. So I don't recommend anybody uses a sander like that. Just use an orbital sander perhaps. Here we are wrapping it in plastic wrap, getting it ready to be fiberglassed. So the first thing you want to do is wrap it in plastic wrap, make it nice and tight. And then after that, what I would suggest doing is not wrapping it like I had then an additional direction. That actually ended up making air pockets and voids, which were really hard to fill with fiberglass, even when I had vacuum bagged it. And I'll show you the vacuum bagging later, but it ended up being quite a bit of a mess. So here we are where I take the fiberglass, cutting it to size. If I was going to do this again, I definitely would cut smaller pieces, as it makes it a lot easier to drape them on. In order to get a mold release, I ended up using turtle wax or car wax basically all over this plastic wrap, and that'll help allow it to peel out a little bit easier later on once I cut this in half to remove the foam core. So here I am pre-impregnating the material with the epoxy resin. I like Total Boat epoxy resin. It has really nice pumps that make sure you get the right ratios. I also really like West Systems epoxy, but that's more of an aviation grade, and that's just a little bit more expensive. So here you're going to want to basically just spread the material on a table, fill it with epoxy resin. This will make sure you get a lot of epoxy resin into the material and not too much. And then on to vacuum bagging. After I did about 2 to 4 layers of fiberglass, I then sealed all around a bag and then vacuumed all the air in order to help push the material down onto the core and give it a nice solid bond and let it cure overnight. So you're going to want to do that. Here you can see sucking it down, removing all the air. If I was going to make a real kayak, I probably would want 4 sheets of fiberglass, 4-sheet thickness. This was 2 sheets, which wasn't quite enough, and there was some thin areas. But I believe you could probably get really good results with 4 sheets and then have plenty to sand to make it exactly a smooth surface for you. So using an angle grinder and some scissors, I cut it in half and then basically ended up removing a section for my legs to go through. And then this was the point where I actually decided if I wanted to make it into a real kayak or just a Halloween costume. The deciding point was if my daughter would actually fit inside of it and then be able to use it at the beach. So I had her put a trash bag on so she didn't get covered in fiberglass, but it turned out it was just a little bit too small, and so it was going to purely be a Halloween costume, which was fine with me because I got to learn to build a boat in the process anyways. So some quick spray paint on the outside made it look really pretty, and then some tape around the sharp edges so it wouldn't cut me. And I even added some Plasta Dip on the inside so that way I wouldn't end up getting lots of fiberglass on me. It kind of matte down the fiberglass on the inside. So what is a kayak if you don't have any paddles or oars with, right? So of course I need a kayak paddle. I grabbed some walnut I had lying around and cut it out, which walnut's really hard, so it moved a lot while trying to do that. And then basically ended up sanding it down into the shape of a general paddle, and then drilling some holes, adding the wooden dowel, and then after some hot glue with the wooden dowel, ended up just basically spray painting it all black. I don't know why they don't make very many other colors for paddles than black, but my paddle was black, so there you go. And how did it turn out? Ready to shred the gnar now. Woo! Yeah! Hit those urban waves. All right. Well, I hope you like that build. It was pretty awesome. It's the first time I've ever built a fiberglass kayak. And if I was going to make an actual kayak, I probably would have made it a little larger. But unfortunately, I didn't think that far enough ahead. But it's nice to know that I could do it if I wanted to next time. So I think that if you're going to build your own kayak, you probably spend about $400 in material, maybe a little bit more, and you definitely spend more time doing one side of the kayak at a time, either the top and then the bottom or vice versa. And then eventually you'd want to cut the seam along horizontally and then join them back together and not put a hole in the bottom because I was using it as a Halloween costume, but you wouldn't want that in a real boat, would you? So in either case, it was a great build for me. I learned a lot. This is the first build video where I've actually done time lapse and actually stitched videos together and did audio editing. So I'm learning a lot from that, standpoint. So I hope you like it. If you like this, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Thanks.